Hey guys, my name is Simeo, and welcome to episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming-related questions, and then I'll give my humble opinion on them. To get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a Facebook or Twitter message. The first question for today is, do you think that Ubisoft should remove problem operators just like Fortnite does with weapons that aren't working out? Well, I gotta give it to Epic Games on the way that they've handled Fortnite, because this policy, I think, has given them a lot of creative freedom. Because they don't shackle themselves down with the idea that as soon as they add an item on in, that it's there forever, this allows them to experiment. Want to try out a new weapon? Just go for it. If it works, great. If it doesn't and it's overpowered, remove it from the game entirely and maybe try adding it on in later. They've realized that they're not infallible, that they're going to be making some mistakes, but they also give themselves the freedom to experiment with these crazy items, and I think that really helps the game of Fortnite. The thing is, though, I don't really think that would work for Rainbow Six Siege. I'm assuming you're referencing Ella and Lion. When they were first introduced, you could even go as far as Blackbeard. When they were introduced, they were blatantly overpowered. Well, how great would it be is if Ubisoft, instead of forcing everyone to work around these blatantly overpowered operators for months on end, it was 6 months for Ella, well, what if they just removed them from the game and then maybe reintroduce them later? The big problem with this idea, though, is that people have actually purchased these operators, unlike in Fortnite where everything is free. Yeah, it's okay in Fortnite if they remove a weapon because no one actually spent money on it. In Siege, either people bought it with the Season Pass, Rainbow Six Siege credits, or grinded it out with 25,000 Renown. If all of a sudden Ubisoft was like, hey, you know that operator that you're really fond of right now and that you actually spent money on? Well, we're gonna take it away for a bit. That is gonna cause a lot of people to get upset, and rightfully so. Now, some of you might argue, well, they could just reimburse them. Well, how do you do that with the Season Pass? Are you just gonna give them Rainbow Six Siege credits? Is that even really something that they could do legitimately? I have no idea. Like, that would just be a mess in its own. Personally, I would just much rather Ubisoft have balance patches come out significantly faster than they do right now. Now, I realize that it does take some time for us to get a good grasp if a new operator is overpowered. For the first couple of weeks, of course, everyone's gonna play as that new operator, so they're gonna have a really high pick rate, and they might have a high win rate as well because no one knows how to play against it. The thing is, though, is I don't think we need to wait 2 months to see any changes. We had to wait a whole 2 months to see any update to Lion. A lot of people felt that he was overpowered for a lot longer. It was pretty evident for like a month after he came out that yeah, he needs some tuning, but we had to wait another month until we saw any adjustments. We had to wait 6 months until Ella was in a well-balanced position. I feel like that is pushing things way too far. And while there might be some unseen forces that we just don't know about that is causing these delays, maybe one of them is that they have to send their patches to Microsoft and Sony to go through the authentication process. I hear that takes a while, and so that could be one of the reasons why these patches are delayed. Whatever the reason is, it's slowing things down, and in a perfect world, I would just rather these patches come out faster so that we don't have these broken operators for an extended period of time. The next question is, what do you think about adding in an RPG into Rainbow Six Siege? So I've always joked about bringing in a new operator that had access to an RPG because it seems ridiculous. But if we try to take a look at it from an actual legitimate standpoint, how would this actually function? Maybe this could be a great way at opening up really big lines of sight onto the objective. If you're on the second floor of Chalet, for example, and you want to see down into the basements, we'll just fire this down at the ground below you and just open everything up. You don't need breaching charges anymore. You don't need anything like Buck anymore. You basically just fire this down, maybe only get one of them, and now you have a gigantic line of sight onto that objective itself. That could be a significant game changer. And while all of this doesn't seem too unreasonable so far, why not have something that's just bigger than Ash? It's not going to be as versatile because you only get one of them. You can't use it on multiple surfaces, but that could add some value to the game. Well, I feel like the majority of the player base wouldn't use it for its intended purpose. They would just use it to take out the enemy. If you know that someone is in a room, well, you don't need to throw a nade. You don't need to throw a flashbang to disorient them. You don't even need to charge on in. Just whip this thing out, fire it down range, and because it's able to take out walls, a lot of walls, well then of course it's probably also going to deal some significant damage and probably take them out. Now Ubisoft could work around this by saying, oh, it only does some damage to players, it doesn't outright take them down, but then you run into some authenticity issues. Like, really, in RPG, you fire this directly at someone, it's not gonna drop them? That's gonna feel a little bit weird, and while yes, once again, we are playing a video game, not everything needs to be ultra realistic, I feel like a lot of the player base would scratch their head at that, and that would be a significant downside of having that gadget introduced if that was the way they wanted to balance it. And so it's for that very reason why I would be very surprised if we ever got an RPG added into Siege. We might get something similar in the future, they might call it something different, it doesn't do any splash damage against the defensive team, but opens up really large holes. We have Ash, we have Buck, we have Sledge with these smaller destructive holes, but what if they went much larger with it? That could actually change the way that we play the game. It might be for the worse, it might be too powerful, if all of a sudden the entire floor above you is now open and every defender on the objective now has to run away from the objective because they opened up a huge line of sight. That could cause some issues, but that might be something that they could experiment with in the future. The next question comes from William, and it is, what do you think about a new map being purely based underground, like a hidden science lab or a bunker that would be massive? So conceptually, this sounds really cool. It would be a unique experience. I think if Ubisoft put their heads together, they'd be able to create something that was fresh and fun for all of us to experience, but I will admit that this is giving me flashbacks to Tower. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not the biggest fan of Tower. It looks incredible, it's probably one of the coolest looking maps in the game. It fulfills that fantasy of rappelling outside of this gigantic skyscraper and rappelling on in, but the actual gameplay itself, for me, leaves a lot to be desired. One of the issues I have with it is that it's massive and there's no way for you to really feel comfortable on the offensive team because there's just too many nooks and crannies for defense to roam around and catch you by surprise. Now, I don't think that being a massive map is necessarily a bad thing. I know a lot of people aren't really a fan of Theme Park, but personally, I don't really mind it. One criticism that I've heard a lot about Theme Park is that you never feel safe on offense because it's too large for you to drone out. And while I do see where people are coming from with this concern, I think the reason why I'm not as bothered by it on this map is that there's a lot more choke points. As long as you have someone watching the train or you place a claymore down in that location, there's only like 1 or 2 ways into that section. Really only one way if you're trying to get into the bunks. As long as you have someone watching that, you're good to go. There isn't anything like that on Tower whatsoever. There's just a bunch of rooms, it's a giant maze, and anyone can hit you from any direction at any moment, and that leads to a lot of frustration. The other reason why I'm not too fond of Tower is that, well, you don't have to deal with spawn peeking. That's great, I know a lot of people like that aspect about it, but as soon as you are inside of the building, you're pretty much at the mercy of anyone roaming around. On every other map, as long as you're on the outside of the building, that's pretty much where you're safe on offense. Sure, they could peek from a window, they could run outside, but for the most part, that's where you have the advantage. As soon as you step inside, that's defender's territory, and that's basically the entire map of Tower. Now, the reason why I bring all of this up is that while an underground map sounds like it'd be really cool, I fear like it would have the same problems that Tower does. You describe it being massive, which of course Tower is gigantic. It doesn't necessarily mean that it wouldn't work, like we talked about. Being a massive map isn't inherently a bad thing. It can be designed around, but that's one kind of concern that I have. But also, you wouldn't be able to rappel inside. I mean, maybe they could do something with like an elevator system. That could be one workaround, but it would definitely probably have the same problems that Tower does, where it's all inside, you're always at the mercy of roaming defenders. And I don't know if I want to have a map like that just yet. Maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years if they want to experiment a bit, but I would much rather them just go with a conventional design because I think that would be better for the long term. But of course, that is just my opinion. The next question comes from Andrew, and it is, what do you think about when you and your team are choosing operators in the pregame? It would show the operator you choose as well as your teammates, as it shows a 3D model of what you're running, like it does at the end of the game for the winning team instead of just the player cards. So that would be really cool. If you were able to show off all the cosmetic items that you had on your character, what helmet you had, your uniform, if your weapon had the skin, all of that was displayed as you're loading into the game, that could be a really cool addition. Not only would this just allow you to finally be able to see the cosmetic items that you have on your character, because when you're in game, it's kind of hard to see what your character looks like, but also you can show off these cosmetic items to your teammates a little bit more. I think that could add some value. The only reason why I don't think this will ever happen, though, is that this might increase the load times in between matches, and of course that is something that Ubisoft wants to avoid. I don't know what it's like on console, but at least on PC, you have matches that can take way too long because there's just that one guy that refuses to load on in. Now, I don't know if that's internet connection, I don't know if it's just because of the hardware that that player has for their PC, but if there's anything that would slow that process down even further, I don't know if that's something that we want in the game. And so while personally I love this idea, if Ubisoft was able to make it work where it didn't increase load times at all, then absolutely add it on in, but I just don't think that's the case. But yeah guys, that is about it for today's episode of Sunday Mailbox. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought about what we discussed in today's video. Do you like the idea of having an RPG operator added in Rainbow Six Siege? Do you think that's a terrible idea? Let me know down below in the comment section. As always, if you would like to submit your own question for an upcoming episode, you can also leave a comment down below or by sending me a Facebook or Twitter message. But until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.